So I welcome all of you to today evening's talk on personal management mantra. I'm grateful to the organizers of the Urban Yoga Center for allowing this opportunity and for all of you to also come here. And I'll be speaking on the topic of productivity in activity through spirituality. I would like to begin with a small experiment. So we will be handing all of you a set of matchsticks. Yes. Where are these? Yeah. So what is to be done is, there are 6 matches. I'm going to talk about how spirituality can expand our perceptions. So what is to be done with these matches is, we have to, if possible, make 4 triangles with these matches. So there are 6 matches there. So as many triangles as possible by rearranging those matches. So any ideas? So it seems a little difficult, isn't it? So here's one way visually I can depict it. If you go it vertically, then we can make it. So think in a higher dimension. We think of triangles, we think of flat triangles. But if you think in terms of pyramid, then it's possible. So many times, solutions elude us because we think within particular dimensions. As Einstein said famously that problems cannot be solved at the same level of consciousness that created them. Now, this simple experiment, how does it apply to our daily lives where we have various activities to do? As I said, productivity and activity through spirituality. That is the mantra that I'm talking about. So often when we talk about our day, we have, say, 24 hours. And then in that we have so many activities to do. And we try to slot, okay, this time this activity, this time this activity, this time this activity. And sometimes trying to fill in everything that we have to do within a day seems to be like, sometimes when some people want to go on a journey and then they're taking a suitcase, but they want to put their full house in the suitcase. It seems impossible because it is impossible. So sometimes trying to do all the activities that we have to do just seems impossible. And at such times, often there are hidden time wasters that we often don't factor in. And that time waster is our own thoughts. Time is taken not just by actions, but also by thoughts. Suppose we have a conflict with someone, and the conflict may just some harsh word is spoken within 10 seconds, 15 seconds, but that thought stays in the mind. And later on, we may be spending 1 hour in assignment, but that 1 hour is taken not by the task, it is taken by the thought. And although externally we're doing the activity does not translate into productivity because there is the barrier created by the thoughts. So often, the way our thoughts, undesirable thoughts, consume our time is something which does not come in our schedules. And it is not talked about in our plans. And unfortunately, thoughts, especially negative thoughts about problems and worries, they seem to come with an inbuilt mental glue. That means once a problem starts surfacing in our mind, it just doesn't go away. It just stays there and stays there and stays glued. And as I often say, that life determines our problems, we determine their size. Life determines our problems, we determine their size. That means certainly there are troubles, there are problems, there is stress, but the more we dwell on a problem, the more that problem seems to become bigger and bigger in our mental world. And as it becomes bigger and bigger, it makes us more distracted and sometimes more demoralized. And this way, thoughts take a huge amount of time. So one example of, I talked about, say, irritation or anger due to insult. Another common time consumer at the level of thoughts is worry. Worry, when the mind is worried, the mind becomes like a ceiling fan. The ceiling fan keeps moving round and round, but gets nowhere. So like that, when the mind is worried, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? And because of that, although the mind is hyperactive, either we are paralyzed into inactivity or we are frenzied into inconsiderate activity, not well considered activity, which again does not translate into productivity. Based on how people are able to regulate their thoughts, broadly, people can be classified into 3 levels. Some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and some people wonder what happened. So, some people, I was talking about anxiety. So anxiety is a time waster. It puts our thoughts and actions out of sync. So we are doing one activity, but if there is stress, our thoughts are caught up somewhere else. And because of that, we are not productive. Now worry is not something which we allot time in our schedules. It's not that every evening 7 o'clock to 7:30 is my worry time. No one allocates time like that in worrying. But still, if sometimes when we have a headache, whatever work we try to do, because of that nagging pain of the headache, we are not able to be efficient. So just like there can be a nagging pain at the back of our head, similarly, worry becomes like a nagging background noise. And it distracts us, it saps our energy. So the present is all that we have. And the present is all that we will ever have. We will never have anything more than the present moment. And worry makes us absent in the present. Worry makes us absent in the present. It puts our thoughts elsewhere. Now certainly problems have to be dealt with, but the only time we will have to deal with any problem is in the present. And worry usually is not about the task at hand. Because when we have a task at hand and we are doing something about it, we have a sense of control, we have a sense of purpose, and there's a feeling that I'm doing something constructive. But usually worry is about the things which we are not doing anything about right now. And worry saps our energy in 2 ways, among many. First is when I'm doing something, worry makes me worry about something else about which I'm not doing right now. And that way, I underperform in what I'm doing right now. And because I underperform, this creates complexities. And then when I go to the next activity, which I was worried about earlier, then worry makes us worry about the previous job I did bad. And in that way, sometimes worry takes our thoughts ahead of our actions, sometimes worry takes our thoughts behind our actions. And basically, by keeping our thoughts and actions out of sync, worry makes us underproductive. Not just underproductive, it can make us unproductive. Worry can even make us counterproductive. So, in sports, for example, now I come from India. India, Australia have a relationship of cricket. Now in cricket, you see that often players, when they come under stress, they have a rush of blood and they either play a rash shot and a very well set player by one rash shot can lose the wicket and then is out of the match, at least for that match. So that happens because they say we say that somebody plays a rash shot, he lost his head. So lost his head basically means the thoughts and actions were not in sync. Now, what causes anxiety? There is some very interesting research on this subject, and anxiety is caused not just by outer uncertainty, but by inner instability. What I mean by this is, researchers have found that in developing countries, people have many more reasons to be worried about. Often in developing countries, food, clothing, shelter, electricity, water, these necessities themselves are not very certain. And that causes anxiety. But curiously enough, through statistical surveys and through reports of psychiatrists, it's been found that consistently that the anxiety levels among people are more in the developed countries than in the developing countries. And not only that, when people from developing countries immigrate to a developed country, they also tend to become more anxious, more stress-filled than what they were in their own countries. And even in India, as in the metropolitan cities, which are increasingly developed, increasingly westernized, the anxiety tends to be much more in the cities as compared to the villages. So, why is it that when there is greater, relatively speaking, security about life's necessities, why is it that in the developed countries there is more anxiety? One major reason which psychologists have found is that in the developed countries there is a greater stress on externals. That means that a person's sense of identity, of self-identity and self-worth is wedded to externals a lot. That means if I am going to purchase a new dress, say I decide to purchase a new jeans. If a new jeans is just a dress item, then there is not much worry about it. But if a jeans is also a statement of who I am, it's a status symbol. Then in a status-driven society, every single action that we do becomes very weighty. So psychologists did survey and they found that in a simple activity, say if a person enters at the movie theater and then comes and sits on a particular seat in the movie theater. So, as compared to Indians and Americans, in this simple activity, it was found that Americans felt that they had done double the number of decisions as Indians had done. So for example, if we go to a theater, which ticket should I purchase? What will people think about which ticket I purchase? If I'm going to sit in a seat, which seat should I sit on? And if I am with two people, if I am a person, should I sit on the left or should I sit on the right? So every small thing, when it is made into a big thing, then the mind no longer has energy to deal with the big things. So stress, when I'm saying that it is not just a result of outer uncertainty, it is a result of inner instability. That means the mental energy gets exhausted over small things. And because of that, the mind, after it runs through its capacity, then it gets heated, it gets stressed. So our mental energy is often lost on small things. To keep small things small is a big thing. To keep small things small is a big thing. And in a status-driven culture, small things are not kept small, they are made very big. So how does this apply to our discussion on productivity? We have certain work to do, certain tasks to complete. And if our mental energy could be focused on the task at hand, then the productivity would increase much more. It's as if we are using a computer. And if in the computer there are viruses, then no matter how well I work on the computer, the output is not going to come because the viruses are going to delete whatever work I do. So the output will not come. Between the input and the output in the computer, the viruses will cause an impediment which will damage the output. So like that, our mind, we have certain desires, we have certain aspirations, we have certain talents, we have certain targets. And based on these, the input comes in. And then our performance, our productivity is the output. Now, in between the two is the mind. And if the mind is contaminated with virus-like thoughts. Now, viruses have multiple characteristics. The term virus is used both for biological entities which cause diseases, and they are also used for software programs. Now, although in constitution, in composition, these two viruses are of different nature, but in consequence, both have a similar effect. Just as viruses damage the body, similarly, the germs, the viruses, the microscopic viruses, which are biological entities that damage the biological body. Similarly, the electronic viruses, which are there in the software, they damage the electronic structure of the machine. So similarly, there are psychological viruses. We extend the virus as a metaphorical term further. Our own thoughts act as viruses. In the body, there is growth, which is a normal, natural, and desirable function. A small baby is, in the conception, just one tiny microscopic cell. And from that baby, by the process of growth, all of us have come about with our millions of cells in our body. Now, this has happened by a process of normal, natural, desirable growth. In the body, there is another kind of growth, that is the growth of cancer. The defining difference between cancerous growth and healthy growth is a lack of proportion, a lack of context. When the body grows normally, all the parts in the body grow in a proportionate, harmonious way. Whereas when there is cancer, then cancerous cells grow without any regard to the host in which they are growing. And although growth is normal, natural, desirable, growth which is disharmonious with its context, with its host organism, that is dangerous. It can be fatal. So quite often, if our thoughts are not disciplined, if we don't have means to discipline our thoughts, then thoughts can grow like cancers. And growth for growth's sake. When the body there is growth for the overall increase in the functionality of the body. But growth only for growth's sake. That is the defining characteristic of cancer. And it damages others. So often, the thoughts, if they are not disciplined, then we have one problem, and that problem stays in the mind and it grows. And it grows till a person just breaks down. In India, I suppose it's in Australia also, in India the pressure for education is huge. The competition for education is not just a matter of getting a good career, but education is a huge matter of prestige. So, in one of the colleges where I conduct seminars, there was a girl. She was in the medical college. They had 8 semesters. 7 semesters, she had come first in her class. Not just among the toppers, the topper. And in the final exam also, it was the last exam of her career, she studied very well, and she had all the preliminary exams she had done very well, and she was well on track to being the topper. But somehow, she got the anxiety. What if I don't come a topper? And that one thought grew and grew and grew and grew. And 7 days before the exam, somehow that thought came, it grew and grew and grew. And the day before the exam started, in the previous night, she committed suicide. She committed suicide for no reason other than the fear, how will I live if I don't come first in my class? Now if you look from, what is the big deal, you may think. If you don't come first, you come second. If you don't come second, you come third. It's not the end of the world. Why would anyone make such a worry so worrisome that a person ends one's life because of that? This is no doubt an extreme example, but this is an example I'm giving to illustrate how growth for growth's sake can be cancerous. And one worry, if it is not attended to, if it is not dealt with properly, it can grow to disastrous proportions. And sometimes, if we are not introspective, we may not even realize, we sometimes just find ourselves in a foul mood. Now somebody just snap at others sometimes. And we may not even realize why we are angry. But what usually happens is that there was some irritation, minor irritation, which we did not process. I'll explain what I mean by processing in a few minutes. But when that was not processed, it just stayed. It stays at the back of the mind, and then when some other irritation comes up, then our reaction is not in proportion to the problem. Whatever, some person has made some mistake, and yes, some degree of correction is required. But if there has been an earlier unprocessed thought, then that unprocessed thought becomes like, that unprocessed thought makes our consciousness like a pressure cooker. And just as pressure cooker, you touch, sudden whistle blows. So like that, suddenly all the steam just comes out. And whoever happens to be in the path at that time, that person gets hit. So this is a relatively, this is a more commonplace example. That example of somebody committing suicide because of a future worry, that is extreme. But we letting some irritation carry over, say we have some relationship issue at home, and then we come to job and then we snap at someone at the job, or we have some problem at the job and we go home and then we snap at our family members, although what the problem specifically they may have caused is very small. So this is what happens when thoughts are unprocessed, and they, without our conscious intention, they grow. And when the thoughts grow like this, their disproportionate growth, as I said, it not only decreases our productivity, it can be counterproductive. It damages our prospects, it can even destroy careers. Now, when I talked about processing of thoughts, our thoughts can be broadly classified into 4 categories. There are positive thoughts, there are negative thoughts, there are essential thoughts, and there are waste thoughts. So I'll start with essential and waste, and then I'll come back to positive and negative. Essential, for example, say you came by a walk or by a car from your workplace, or you will go from here to your home. So now when you're driving the vehicle, you have to see who is coming from left, who is coming from right, what are the signals. Now thoughts about practical activities that we have to do, they are essential or functional thoughts. We have to think those thoughts. Now along with that, there are waste thoughts. Thoughts which are not really, at least immediately, relevant to what we are doing. So what happened in which part of the world, what happened there. So often there is gossip, which is largely a source of waste thoughts. Information is useful, but information without any context or without any purpose can often just take up space in our head, and that can waste our energy. Now these 2 thoughts, categories essential and waste, are in terms of the functional utility of those thoughts. The other 2 categories I'm going to talk about is positive and negative, are in terms of their effect on us. So the effect of the thoughts and the utility of the thoughts, the 2 different ways of looking at it. In terms of effect, certain thoughts are positive. Say, for example, if someone appreciates us, we feel encouraged, we feel enlivened. Or for that matter, if we genuinely appreciate someone and that person's face becomes filled with a bright smile, just seeing that person happy, that makes us happy. So appreciation, love, pleasure, protection, confidence, these are all positive thoughts. And as contrasted with the negative thoughts, there can be hatred, there can be irritation, depression, low self-esteem, stress. These are negative thoughts. Now, whichever thought we allow to enter into our mind, it will gradually grow. It will gradually grow. How does it grow? It can grow either by our conscious attention. We pay attention to it, and because of that it grows. And in some cases, in the case of essential thoughts, it's desirable. If we are going on a road and somebody is coming from left, you see it, somebody is coming from there, the thought enters into our mind, and we need to focus. So because we consciously focus with a purpose, that thought grows. That's desirable. But other times, the thought grows not because we consciously focus, but because we don't consciously drive away that thought. We don't consciously flush away that thought from our mind. So it's just there and keeps growing. And if somebody spoke something and it keeps nagging at the back of our mind, and then suddenly it just fills us with stress. Different people have different kinds of anxiety attacks. And psychologists, when they try to find out what are the triggers for the anxiety attacks. So different people have different triggers, but quite often, one of the most important strategies for anxiety attack victims to counter the anxiety attacks is to identify their triggers. So when I said that some thoughts can grow cancerously, all of us may have different kinds of thoughts which are cancerous for us, depending on our nature, depending on our priorities, depending on our relationships. Something or else can become cancerous. So now if you see from the productivity function point of view, we would like to focus on essential thoughts, essential functional thoughts. We try to remove waste thoughts. And in order to be more effective, we will be more energized if we could focus on positive thoughts and we could avoid negative thoughts. Now, if we are to do this, if there is dirt in the house, we can flush it, we can clean it using a vacuum cleaner, using some machine. But how do we deal with, how do we process the thoughts in our mind? This is where spirituality comes into the picture. Essentially, spirituality is about the unchanging within the changing. The more, as I said, spirituality offers stability. I said that anxiety comes not so much because of outer uncertainty, but because of inner instability. So spirituality offers stability. How does it happen? It connects us with our unchanging core. If a boat is there in an ocean, the waves in the boat are inevitable. And those waves will keep the boat moving. And the bigger the waves, the more the boat will move. But if the boat is anchored to something heavy, that anchorage will bring stability to the boat. So similarly, the events of the world externally and the emotions within us internally, they often go up and down like in a sine wave. And when they go up and down in a sine wave, they keep us restless. When they keep us restless, they sap our energy. So what spirituality does is offer us an alternative anchorage for our thoughts. Just like a boat anchored to a heavy object will not be shaken by the waves. So like that, a person who is spiritual, who can connect with the spiritual core, has an inner anchorage which brings inner stability. The more things change, the more we need to embrace the things that don't change. Dealing with stress is not just a matter of giving ourselves pep talks. Don't worry, cool down. Yes, these sort of things will help a little bit. But we all need some sense of stability and continuity in our life. If that is not there, then the changes will definitely create stress. So the more things change, the more we need to embrace the things that don't change. That's what will bring stability. And this is where spirituality plays such an important role. That spirituality tells us that amidst all the change that is there outside us in the world and even inside us in our emotions, beyond that is our core, is the essential locus of who we are, and that is unchanging. So, how do we embrace the things that don't change? So, techniques for linking with the unchanging, there is yoga, meditation, mantra. I'll talk about all three of these briefly. Yoga is often equated with certain bodily postures. And these bodily postures are important. At the same time, the postures have a purpose. Like going back to cricket, different batsmen may have different postures. Somebody may we stand with the bat upraised, somebody with the bat touched to the ground, somebody with both legs close to each other, some batspersons would stand with legs apart. But the point of the posture is not just to stand in the posture all the time. The point of the posture is to be able to hit the ball effectively when it comes. Similarly, yoga is not just about postures. Postures do help in relaxing the body, in shaping the body, in healing the body, but these are external benefits. The purpose of yoga is to launch our consciousness to the spiritual level. Just as the purpose of the batting posture is to launch the ball towards the boundary. So like that, the purpose of the yogic postures is to launch our consciousness towards the spiritual level. What exactly do we mean by consciousness towards the spiritual level? The Bhagavad Gita is one of the world's most ancient yoga texts. And it describes that the source of personality is spiritual. From the biological point of view, this mic is made of the same substances that, from the biochemical point of view or the chemical point of view, as my hand. Ultimately, it's made of atoms and molecules. This is made of atoms and molecules. And yet, this doesn't have consciousness. I have consciousness. If this is hit, it doesn't feel pain, but I feel a sensation. So, one of the biggest unsolved questions in the world of science, as acknowledged by Science magazine, its 25th anniversary magazine, it said that we have 10 big unanswered questions. The first was, they said, is where did the universe come from? And second question is, where does consciousness come from? Where does consciousness come from? So this itself is a big subject, but I'll just give one example of a scientific experiment to illustrate the non-physical, the non-material nature of consciousness. So one of the world's last century's most well-known neurosurgeon was Dr. Wilder Penfield, Nobel laureate neurosurgeon, and he did experiments to try to find out where does consciousness come from. So normally we understand that consciousness is associated somewhere with the brain. But in the brain, there is no one particular place from where consciousness comes out. So he did an experiment. Researchers know that there are certain parts of the body which are connected with certain functions. So there is a motor nervous system which can connect with movements of hands and legs. Gustatory cortex is connected with the taste, like that. So now the brain, if we put electrodes into it and activate it, then, so he had a subject, and he told the subject, raise your hand. The subject raised the hand. He said, what happened? He said, I raised my hand. Okay, put your hand down. Put his hand down. And now using electrodes put in the head, he activated the exact same area of the brain. And hand went up. What happened? He said, my hand went up. Okay. Did you raise the hand? He said, no. I didn't raise the hand. You raised the hand. So, now, he did this with various parts of the brain on various patients, and he found that in each case, when the first time, when the subject was asked to raise, the subject said that I am the doer of the action. In the second case, the subject said that I am the observer of the action. Now what this means is that if I have a computer, it's my computer, and there's a printer attached to it, and I give the print command. When I give the print command, the printer's hand will start moving, and printing will happen. Now, if you come near my computer, and you press the print command, the same thing will happen. So, the hardware, the computer structure here and the printer, they are basically a unit. But either I can operate it or you can operate it. The effect will be the same. So now in the second case, Dr. Penfield said that the brain and the hand are one unit. So I activated the brain, Dr. Penfield activated the brain, and then the hand rose. In the first case, who activated the brain? In the second case, it was a subject outside the person, as Dr. Penfield, who activated the brain. The subject was saying that I did not activate, you activated. But in the first case, he said I activated. That means just as the brain and the hand are a unit that can be operated by activation, but it requires a separate activator. So in the second case, it was Dr. Penfield. In the first case, who was it? So after 4 decades of neuroscientific research, Dr. Penfield concluded that the brain is like a computer. But the programmer exists outside the brain. The programmer, the user exists outside the brain. The self is, he said, non-neurological. It is extracerebral. So of course there is a lot of scientific research on this, and it's intricate. I'm not going to go into that. But suffice it to say that I gave this experiment to just substantiate the point that the spiritual is not just some sentimental concept that we feel stressed and so we imagine that there's something unchanging and try to connect with that. No, there is objective scientific support for the concept of consciousness as non-material. And the whole purpose of yoga is to raise our consciousness from the material level to the spiritual level. So at the material level, things are constantly changing. At the spiritual level, there is calmness, there is stability, there is serenity. And the more we can connect with the spiritual level, just like here he said that you use the sticks in a vertical dimension. Then a problem that is unsolvable at the horizontal dimension, it becomes solvable at the vertical level. Similarly, when we raise our consciousness to the spiritual level, we get a perspective which, first of all, gives us guarantee of our own security. It's like if we are caught in a place on fire. All around there is fire, and at any moment a fire may spring on us. We'll be in anxiety. But if at that time an aircraft from above comes, a rescue helicopter comes, sends a rope and lifts us up. And now, if it's our home, it's our office, we'll still have concern. But there is no immediate threat. So spirituality does not cause the problems, the causes of stress, the causes of worry to disappear. But it raises us above the problems. So once we have a spiritual stability, we can be concerned but not disturbed. We can be concerned but not disturbed. Concerned means, yes, we have interest, we are invested in a particular situation and we want to deal with that situation. But because we don't feel personally threatened by that situation, so we don't become unduly overworked by it. So by connecting with the unchanging, whenever our thoughts, I said that what causes lack of productivity is the thoughts and actions going out of sync. So whenever thoughts and actions go out of sync, if we can raise our consciousness to the spiritual level, then that stability that comes can help us bring our thoughts and actions back in sync. So going back to the point of positive, negative, essential and waste thoughts, spirituality is an unending source of positive thoughts. Because at our spiritual core, we are indestructible. We are uncontaminated. We are pristine. And the more we become aware of this, the more positivity fills within us. So yoga is a means to raise our consciousness. So yoga is a particular posture that is meant to lead to meditation. Meditation, the word is often used for deep thought on any subject. That is fine, but meditation as it is used in a spiritual or a self-actualization context refers to meditation on a spiritual reality. And mantra is a sound vibration. I'll conclude my talk with a brief description of mantras. Mantra is essentially a power-packed sound vibration. Just as we can have alphabets scattered on the ground. And those alphabets don't have much meaning. But when the alphabets come together to form a word, they have some meaning. On the other hand, if we take, say, we have E is equal to MC square. This is simply an arrangement of alphabets and symbols and numbers, but there is so much power, so much wisdom packed in these 5 symbols. So just as in our experience, letters or symbols or sounds, when arranged in specific contexts, can have tremendous meaning, power, significance. So like that in the spiritual context, to describe that certain sound vibrations have enormous power. And in our context, what is the power of mantra? The word mantra in Sanskrit means manas trayate iti mantra. That sound vibration which frees the mind from its troubles is mantra. So the sound of mantra acts like an elevator for our consciousness. I earlier gave the example of a person caught in a fire and being airlifted above. So if a rope is sent down and lifts the person above, so that rope that is sent down, that is the mantra. So the mantra is a sound which helps our consciousness to rise from wherever it is to a higher level. There have been many surveys also done about the potency of mantra. Now, with the scientific methodology, we cannot directly perceive the spiritual reality because science essentially looks for material things. So we can't perceive the spiritual reality with science, but we can perceive the effects of ascending to the spiritual reality at the material level. That means when people chant mantras, the content of their experience we cannot find through science. To explain this, sometimes if a person is sleeping, now by having scientific probes, we can know when a person is dreaming. Now there's REM, the eyes move much faster. There are certain ways in which we can know when a person is dreaming. But if we want to know what that person is dreaming, there is no scientific probe that can tell us that. We can know that a person is dreaming. If we want to know what that person is dreaming, we have to wake up that person and ask, what were you dreaming? So from the external, when a person is dreaming, we can discern the physiochemical effects of that. And by that, we can understand that a dream is happening. But the content of the dream, we cannot verify through science. Because science doesn't deal with consciousness directly. It can point towards it. Similarly, with meditation, with mantra, we cannot verify through science what is the content of that experience, whether that content is real or not. But what we can verify is the effect. So it has been found, there have been many different researches done by different scientists. So one of the researches, here I'm keeping the talk very non-technical, that's why I'm not going into specific quotes and statistics, but most of you, if you want, on my website the information is there, and even if you Google, you will find most of the things that I'm talking about. So what researchers did is that they divided patients into 3 groups. One was all patients had some sickness. So one was they asked them to just take the normal treatment. Second, they told them to chant some mantra which is considered a sacred sound in some spiritual tradition. And third case, they asked them to chant some sound which they just liked. And every day for 25 minutes, do this. And when they compared these three studies, the result they found was that in the first case, normal treatment went on, as was expected. In the second case, there's a dramatic improvement in the health recovery. And in the third case, there was only marginal improvement. So third case means where people chanted some thought that they just like to think about. And in the second case, where people chanted some specific mantra. So here, what exactly is happening? We don't know by chanting mantra what people experience, but the effect of the experience we can see. And people in many big companies in various parts of the world, often they are finding that meditation, or what sometimes is called as power breaks, different terms used in different cultural contexts, help people to become more productive. So what exactly does meditation do? It connects us with the unchanging side of ourselves. And there are various ways of meditation. Mantra meditation is, in the yoga tradition that I belong to, recommended as the most efficacious, most easy way. Because in normal meditation, it's like we have to direct our thoughts. Whereas in mantra meditation, the mantra becomes a pathway along which to move our thoughts. So if we have to make our own road and move through some terrain, it is much more difficult than if there is a road laid out and we move along that road. So mantra becomes like a road for moving our consciousness onwards. And in that way, the chanting of the mantras, if we do it between activity and productivity, there are the obstacles of the distracted thoughts. Those obstacles of the distracted thoughts can be removed by raising our consciousness to the spiritual level through various means like yoga, meditation, and mantra meditation specifically. And in that way, these are just some means, but the important point is management of our thoughts, which can translate our activity into productivity. I'll summarize and then we can have some questions. I started by the topic of productivity in activity through spirituality. That is the personal management mantra. And then I talked about how, through the matchstick experiment, if we can think in a higher dimension, problems that are unsolvable, that seem unsolvable, become solvable. So, and then Einstein's quote. And then spirituality offers us the connection with the higher dimension. And in that connection, I talked about how our time is taken not just by activities, but by thoughts. And worry, for example, is an invisible time waster which wastes our time by making our thoughts and actions go out of sync. And to deal with this, to deal with these invisible time wasters which sabotage our activity from becoming transforming into productivity, we need to do some inner housekeeping. And I discussed about how growth for growth's sake is cancerous. How problems seem to have a mental glue by which they stay and they grow rather than they going away. And spirituality, then we discussed for a thought processing, we can classify our thoughts from their functionality point of view into essential and waste, and from their effect on us from the positive and negative. So spirituality helps us to streamline our thoughts so that we focus on essential and positive thoughts, and we can flush out of our consciousness waste and negative thoughts. And how does spirituality do this? By connecting us with our unchanging side. And our unchanging core is not just a matter of some sentimental conceptualization. It's also a matter of having quite a few empirical pointers. I talked about Dr. Penfield's experiment with respect to the coordination between the motor section of the brain and the hand. And then lastly, I talked about yoga, meditation and mantra as means for raising our consciousness above our circumstances so that we can be concerned but not disturbed, so that we can efficiently deal with the problem without feeling threatened by that problem. If we feel threatened, and the anxiety makes our thoughts and actions go out of sync. But if we can be focused without feeling threatened, then we can be productive in dealing with the problems. So I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I think like we're talking about our work. What we normally feel that we learn a different concept. Like today we learned about this concept, and we've done a lot of leadership training in the past. And all those trainings are really good as well. But how long that training stays with us is not consistent. So we are really happy we learn something, we apply, it works, sometimes it doesn't work. How do we make sure that what we learn from training sessions and stuff, that stays with us so that we can implement it again and again? Because it seems to be like, I get really pumped after the training goes and stuff, and after some time, after 2 weeks time, it all goes away. So how can we ensure that things that we learn, we can implement it consistently?
Yeah. So how do we ensure that things we learn we can implement it, don't get lost? As they say, use it or lose it. So I would say that the Bhagavad Gita's approach to yoga is not at all dogmatic. It is invitational and experiential. What the Bhagavad Gita says is, Pratyaksha-avagamam dharmyam susukham kartumauvyam. It says that this is a process that can be practically experienced. Pratyaksha-avagam, direct experience. So if we hear something and if we try it out, and we try it out for some time and check whether it works. And after it works, also, we may feel inspired to do it for some time. But somehow, even things that work are taken away by our other work. So that's how often something which is useful we learn, we lose that. So it's important as much as possible to try to have the company of those who are trying something which we want to try. Because then we can become something akin to spiritual explorers. Explorers in the territory of consciousness. So, okay, just as we may have heard some adventure stories, somebody climbs the top of Mount Everest, or somebody goes to Antarctica. So if people are going together, they exchange their reports. Okay, I went this way, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened. And then they can, so like that, if we have some friends with whom we try things out, then that sharing of our experiences and sharing of our epiphanies, it has a synergistic and symbiotic effect. And then not only does the learning become deeper, but it lasts longer. It becomes more transformational. So first by trying it, and ideally trying it with a few other friends, or making friends with those who are also trying it, that can help us to benefit in a sustainable and transformational way with that knowledge. Okay? Thank you.